today. I didn't come over with the pioneers, but I was close.
What I want to do today, I want to talk about how do you build a partnership with elected or appointed officials. I'm going to take it from a perspective of 30 years that I've been dealing with. And as I look around the room, I find that there's a lot out here that probably have good tales. Probably some of you have got more stories on what we should avoid. That's where we learn. That without the partnership with elected officials, appointed officials, what is going to come up? As a good friend of ours told me back, if you don't have that partnership, and that partnership is not solid, following a disaster, you will be lucky to be employed 30 days. And we've seen that across the country. So we're going to talk about it. It's going to be an open dialogue. So I'm going to pick on some of you that I know in the front row. I'm returning some favors. Because he's been successful. Some of you have been successful. We have some appointed officials that I can pick on and get their perspective, what they would like to see out of emergency management personnel. How do we build a foundation? How do we get off on the right track? So when and if that little event happens, you, people you work for, are on the same page. So are we good with that? Any questions, please feel free to say it up the yellow screen. We talk about chief elected officials. We got mayors and town presidents, county commissioners, tribal presidents, college and university presidents, sheriffs, special service district chairs. These are the people who have the ultimate dollar stops at my desk. How many of those people really understand what emergency management is? Really could take a 10-question test on what emergency management is and what is their role. On the other side, you've got city and town councils. All of them are willing to do what? Help. Sometimes to a hindrance. If you have 5 members of the city council and they're out talking to the public following an event, what are you liable to get as the emergency management personnel? 5 different scenarios. County commissioners are unique because they wear 2 hats. Many are the chief elected official of a county, but also they have legislative duties in some of our rural and smaller counties. So they wear 2 hats. Which one are they wearing today? Tribal councils, college and university boards of trustees, special services boards. All of these folks make policies that affect you and I in emergency management. What do we do? How do we do it? Now comes some new ones. City administrators, county administrators, city managers. Whatever name goes with it, a lot of times they are vested in the operation of either the city or the county or the town. How many of those folks really have a clear understanding of what emergency management is? What is their role? How do they activate resources? How do they find resources? What's the statewide mutual aid agreement? And how does that work? How does it affect them? One step is to sit down, and sometimes this is challenging because when you look at the slide with the elected officials, our elected officials mission that they're responsible for. Some are full-time, some are part-time, some are paid, some are not paid, some are volunteers. How do they find time? But on the other hand, what are the expectations that those folks have for you? What do they want you to do? What is your expectation in emergency management of that elected official? I have found, and some of my friends have found, sit down with them. What do you want? What do you want from me? Come up with some goals, some objectives. What do you want from Jim Buchanan for the next year? Does a couple of things for me. Keeps me on track where I need to be. What do I need to accomplish by the end of 2015? Our mayor would know exactly where I'm going, where I should be, and what is he involved in. I got old after about 12 years of doing this, and being frustrated of having 6 people talking to the public, 6 people going in different directions, and I'm trying to manage cats. So saying to the city council, I have no problem with you coming to the EOC, none whatsoever. But unless you take these courses, you're an observer. I can't have the confusion. I was lucky. One, I stayed employed. And 2, most of them said, thank you. I don't want to be involved. I want to come know what's going on. Because in the communities, especially in small communities, and maybe even in our larger communities, if you want to know what's going on in a community, who do you call? You call the mayor? You call a city council member or a county council, because who do you know? Who are they? They might be the next door neighbor. They might be in the same church. Your kids may go to the same school. So you go over and say, Ruth, what's going on? And Ruth tells you. And hopefully Ruth's on the same page as Jim. And we're not going, oh boy, we've got problems. So that, developing that relationship right up front. Now it gets frustrating because these elected officials in most cases are what? Elected every 4 years. So you get them all trained, you get them all NIM certified, you're thinking, hey, well, I got an easy streak now to hold the election, guess what? All of them got thrown out, you got a whole new money, so you're starting over. But if you go in that first week, first month, whatever your organization will allow you to get in, whether it be your appointed officials, you get into those elected officials, come up with a game plan. What's your strategy? What does the mayor, what does the county commissioner of this community want from me? Because those of you, and I look around the room, and most of you have been in emergency management more than 2 days. How big a piece of pie are you trying to handle? It's huge. And when we really think we understand all emergency management, guess what? They bring up something new. I was around when they brought NIMS out. Everybody scratched their head and went, holy cow now. Well, what's the newest thing we're talking about? Recovery. We've been response oriented for years. Now we're talking about how do we recover. Come up with that game plan. What do you want from the mayor? What do you want from the county commissioner? What do you want from the board of trustees? What do you want from the city council? You want these folks to be an asset to you, to be a resource. Because following a disaster, you're not going to have time to deal with the events, put your community back together, and then go out and take these people by the hand and change it. According to law, holy cow, I gotta undo this one. Tell you mayor. The mayor did it in about 6 months. Brigham City experienced a flood. $3 million damage. Brigham City, that's a lot of damage. To some communities, that's handled in normal day-to-day operation. This nice mayor says to the community that lives along the area that was flooded, we'll make you whole. We will fix everything that was damaged. We hauled rocks 6 months to inside and level ground. It was like, what are we doing? Because I failed to get in quick enough and explain how the process worked. The same event, because of working through the county, through the state, we get a presidential declaration. We're getting public assistance. You've got a basement full of water, a basement full of mud, and public assistance means what? You're going to do what to my basement? You're going to come clean it out, and you're going to replace the sheetrock and the wiring and the carpet, everything I lost. What is public assistance? What's public assistance? Public infrastructure in city, county, state. So I guess we're going to go out and stand in front of 75 homeowners and say, hi. Let me tell you what public assistance means. Doesn't mean we're going to come help you. Without that foundation, we're in trouble. We take plans before city councils, town boards, county commissioners.
You know, Sandy's looking for
Have they read them? Do they know what's in them? Do they need to know what's in them? That's all they kind of. They need to know what's in your plan? In our dreams. What should they know? What should they know what's in that plan? To make you and have a little sleep a little easier. What should they know? Their roles and your roles. But how many of them they didn't? I remember when we first came out with the Association of regional government. Did a mitigation plan, and everybody had to take it to the city councils, county commissioners. They had problems in those plans. There were things in there that when we took it, I thought, you approved this, but you don't know what we put in it that you're going to do. They need to know. Do they need to know the whole plan now? What's the expectations of the legislative group? People who make policies. What is their role in emergency management? Do they have one? Comments, suggestions? Do they have a role?
I think it's a delicate subject. As I prepared to take my city back for the emergency management course. Hey, we want to bring the city council along. What do you feel about getting city council training? The mayor's office was very specifically
Correct.
saying not know and don't know. But then there depends upon the council when we get back and they will invite.
Yes. And why was I not included?
Yeah. So now we're missing that.
Yeah, who are the people that have probably greater contact with the neighborhoods? It's your town councils, your city councils. Those are the ones who live in the community. So it's a fine line. Determine what that role is going to be. As some of us learned, there were 4 phases of emergency management. Now they've decided there's going to be 5. They really haven't changed. Just taking a different perspective. What are some things that mayors, county commissioners, those people we talked about, elected officials, what can they do? One, they can hire or appoint somebody who has that responsibility. And my recommendation recommendation, because I'm prejudiced, is it shouldn't be somebody who came to the meeting late. It should be somebody who's willing to take on the assignment and learn what's there. What is their role? As the mayor, our mayor, your mayor, the county commissioners should set an example. If you want people to have 72 hours prepared at home, shouldn't your elected officials be leading the pack? Those are the ones who should stand up and say, I've got my 72 hours. I know where my family's going to be if I have to evacuate. I've contacted Brandon in California that if I can't get a hold of people, everybody's going to call Brandon. Those are the people that are looked to in your community. What are your priorities for the organization? What does Mayor A, County Commissioner B, well, what do you want emergency management to look like in this community? If you're not on the same page, how do you, as program manager, and you carry various titles, how do you put together a program if you don't know what it's supposed to look like? If the mayor is going to stand up, or the county commissioner, or the elected official is going to do a press release, it should not be with an emergency manager, emergency coordinator, deputy sheriff, whatever the title is standing behind them with this logo. We're going. That's not too good at the 5 o'clock news. You need to be on that same page. You need to develop that relationship, that foundation. Prevention capabilities necessary to avoid problems. We used to think we could identify most of the problems, and then guess what happened? We started adding more and more. What's the biggest one now that's cruising around out there that's been on, I think, all the major news networks that people are really worried about? We might talk about it, let everybody know what our weaknesses are. The grid system, our electrical grid system. It's got a problem. It can be hacked. How much can we get done right now without a computer? I know you can't buy gas. ATM machine won't work. I was told back when I first got emergency management, the day may come where you have a $50 bill in your pocket. If you really want that diet Coke, it costs you $50. New things keep popping up. Go to Target and find out that all your personal information is on Amazon or others. How do we prevent it? How do we stop it? Come up with ways to stop it. Maybe we can't eliminate it, but maybe we can stop it. Maybe we can do more for it. What actions? Who are then threats? Can we, sitting in this room, do anything about the power grid? How many of you communities have your own electrical generating, electrical power distribution? Okay, you didn't on the grid, but do you have any impact? I'm assuming the one supplier that we all have. Do you have any impact on what's going on? I was asked constantly in my 30 years in Brigham City, what's your biggest fear? You're going to say earthquakes. Gotta be earthquakes. I lose power. I've shut a community down. Mitigation. Your elected officials should know what's in that mitigation plan. They should be willing to include emergency management personnel in zoning and planning reviews. If you're going to put in a new great big subdivision and it only has one way in and one way out, what kind of problems have you created for responders? Responders trying to get in, people trying to get out. Support building and fire codes. commissioners, it's gonna go to the cities and towns, and they're going to be asked to do what to that plan? Be asked to approve it. I don't want to approve something I didn't know what was in it. So how do you get that information to them? Have you ever seen a mitigation plan or your comprehensive emergency plan? Do you really think elected officials have the time to sit and read what's in that plan? Here's my first pickup. Oh, Sandy City. How did Mayor Golden and the city council know what was in your emergency plan?
Well, they didn't read it.
I didn't either, so.
So what we would do is in, city council meetings, we take chapters and we take an issue. And we review what the plan had to be done. So there's some sort of explanation about it. It took a while to go through. And we can get everything, that's when we do it. And we sometimes we include an exercise.
Okay. One thing I found that worked best is that, and this was driven primarily by media wanting copies of all of our plans. If you get a copy of the municipality's plan, you pretty well know where all the weaknesses are. Is we developed summaries, executive summaries, of each plan Brigham City had. No more than 2 pages. It focused primarily on what was in the plan and how did it affect Jim Buchanan, who's now mayor of Brigham City. So here's a page or two they can read, and it did 2 things. One, I knew when I talked about something, it didn't look to me like, what are you talking about? They had an understanding enough to know what their role was and what was going to happen. Because in a disaster, what happens to mayors, governors, college presidents? What happens? Media comes up and says, Mayor, can you tell me what's going on? They make something up. Then who has to fix it? You have to fix it. And fixing it is like walking a tightrope, because what happens if you don't do it right? If you don't walk that line and make the mayor look good, you make the mayor look bad, the county commissioners look bad, the sheriff look bad, what happens to you? Okay? Unfortunately, sometimes, geez, Jim, we budget year, taxes just aren't up there, sales tax is up. Where's this eliminating that job? Jim goes, oh. So have that dialogue. Work with your non-governmental agencies. Work with your Chamber of Commerce. I found in the small community of Brigham City of 20,000 people, trying to keep track of business numbers after 5 on Friday night on a 3-day weekend was almost impossible. But guess who had those numbers? The Chamber of Commerce. So one of these days I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? And the light came on, and I made our executive director of the chamber part of my EOC. If nothing more than somebody I could reach out to and say, Kent, how do I get a hold of Stinger Parsons on a Friday night or a Saturday? Get the answer. A good friend of ours, Mr. Brad, says that for every $1 spent on mitigation, you save $4 in disaster. Well, what is mitigation? Following a disaster, do we rebuild everything exactly the way it was? Or do we look at it and go, we had a 12-inch pipeline, that was okay, but if we have future growth, we might need a 20-inch pipeline. So wouldn't it be smarter for us to put the 20-inch down as opposed to putting in the 12 and then tear it back out in a couple of years because we just put a big development down the road? Private sector. What kind of resources can you get from the private sector? And does every one of those resources cost you or your municipality or your government agency, your business, does it cost you money? In 2005, when we had the floods, we had construction companies, large, out, shoring up rocks over the creek, maintaining the road, it cost us a dime. And their philosophy was, we're part of the community. Also involved. Response, it's the face of the community. For years, we have thought about response. Red lights and sirens. Guns, bullets, water, medical. That's what the public has come to expect. How fast can you get there? How fast can you do it? The real challenge comes with what? When the smoke's on, bad guys are arrested, water's back where it needs to be, it looks like a little creek that everybody wants to go sit and throw rocks in. How do you declare a disaster? You just pick the phone up and you're hurt. I need. What's that do to the process? Judy, what's that do to the process? I call the governor. How come this is enough? Why can't I call the governor? Doesn't he work for me? What happens when I call the governor? What's the governor do? He calls the state. And we've lost time. We lose that time, and it's valuable. What happens when we issue a declaration? Is there anything wrong with issuing a declaration even if you don't use it? It's nice to have it in the file, right, Alan? I got it. I never used it. Put it away. But I got it. Then you have got to track somebody down to do it. Orders of evacuation. Who can issue orders of evacuation? Mayor, fire chief, and some law enforcement, depending on your plan. So as much as I wanted to go to some of my real closest friends and say, get out, I can't do it. I don't have that authority. And when do you evacuate? So there's some challenges involved. Mayors, county commissioners, some special service districts can suspend or limit the sale of some items. We've had a disaster. We're not going to allow the liquor stores to open. You can't sell beer and wine, and we're not going to sell the gasoline after 6 o'clock at night. Those are things that elected officials can do. Where should they come to get the information to do that? Should they make that decision on their own? I got out of bed this morning, feeling pretty honest, Mayor. I think I'm just going to shut things down. Well, I think that's it. Walking through that process, we came up with a very simple flow chart of how a declaration worked. What was the role of the mayor? What's the role of the city council? Because you remember that a declaration is good for how long? 30 days. Then where does it have to go? It has to go back to the legislative board to say, yeah, we'll keep it the way it is, or we'll modify it. The other thing that came clear, and it took a disaster in Utah to do it, is some elected officials have a provision they can suspend ordinances. And we found this when we had the coal disaster, and we couldn't move heavy equipment in because nobody could run on the roads. Found out, oh, we can. Yes, we can. We can do that. This is what we do. We suspend those ordinances for this length of time. Recovery. Ensure that funding is available. Because I thought it was the first part of my career that response was the only thing that really mattered. Then the more I got to looking into recovery, I found out this is a real can of worms. Following a disaster, is your community going to require building permits? Are you going to charge for building permits? If you do building permits, are you going to do inspections? If you're going to do all the above things, do you have the staff to do those things? And the city council comes up and they like Bob and they say, yeah, geez, Bob, I'm really sorry about your house, but yeah, why don't you just go ahead and rebuild and don't worry about the permit and we're not going to inspect it. Just go get it done. 3 weeks later, Susan shows up. And Susan says, hi, well, I lost my house and I need some help. And they're going, Susan, would you go over to the building department and you'll make out a permit and you'll have an inspection and it's going to cost you $10,000 because we have impact fees and this. Wait a minute, Susan scratched her head. No, wait, what happened over here? So Susan goes out and gets a lawyer and comes back to the city council and guess what? They have problems. Because now what have they done? They set a precedent. And it's easy to do if you don't have a recovery plan. When do you get federal assistance and what is it? One of the 3 types of federal assistance we as communities, counties, some special service districts, what can we get? We talked about public assistance is for government. Individual assistance is for how often is individual assistance issued? Rarely.
Huge catastrophic events.
And it does not make people whole. What's the third one? Disaster mitigation plans. Following every disaster, every presidential disaster, a certain percentage of funds are set aside for mitigation projects throughout the state of Utah or whatever state's affected by it. These are things that your elected officials, whether they're legislative, whether they're the chief executive officer, should know and have a basic understanding. All of the elected officials, whatever level, whatever organization, whatever government entity, business you work in, you should understand what is the basic understanding of emergency management. What is continuity of operations? What do you think it is? Keep it in business. As a municipality, whether it's county, state, city, township, are we not in business? Do we not provide services? And what are some of those services? Law enforcement, fire, gas, mailing, garbage. We're in business. You will find if you should have that disaster, a lot of times it doesn't affect the whole community. It only affects what? Parts of it. So what happens if you're not affected and your garbage is picked up? How come you're not picking up my garbage? What's the problem here? We have continuity of operations. We've got to continue making business continue. Oh, continuity of government. Is there a difference? Who's familiar with Title 53 of the state code? I believe it's section 111. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. What does that say? It says every municipality or government agency will, by July 1st, send to the state of Utah a list of continuity of government operations should the mayor, council, whatever, deems appropriate. that. I have to be honest, I don't know what Judy and Bob do with it to get it. But by law, it's supposed to be sent. And if the mayor's incapacitated, mayor, pro tem, county commission, whatever, city council member, whatever, has the authority to act on behalf of the community.
Is that requirement only if you're gonna change the statute, that it is the, who's eligible to do that? Or you said it is different, or you said it is?
The way the law is written, my interpretation, studying on the committee that did it, was it needs to go every year. No matter if it changes. Mayor Dolan, following Mayor Dolan as president of the San Diego City Council, following that is by seniority. If we run out of them people, then maybe we go down to the police chief, the fire chief, the emergency manager, whatever. That's my understanding. I've always erred on the side of sending it, and I know I'm covered. What is the response capability in your community? If you only have X number of law enforcement officers and vehicles and X number of fire vehicles and emergency management vehicles and ambulances, are you limited in what you can do? Who's limited in priority? The house on the hill? The college president? Going to the mayor's house first? They need to understand what those capabilities are. And again, even the city council needs to understand what is the declaration process and when do they get involved. Can you imagine having a declaration issued in 30 days, going to the council on the 31st day, and asking them for approval, and they don't have any idea what their approval is? Continuity between government and the public. Whenever Brigham City had power outages, I could count the number of people who got to know probably on a first name basis that would call the mayor's office and what was their complaint. Switch the power back on because Oprah comes on at 2 o'clock, followed by Dr. Phil. And it got better, and they said, we understand what the problem is, we're working on it, and we anticipate that we could have power back by this time. As opposed to saying, we'll get right on it. Participate required training. What training is required for an elected official? Is there any? What's required? NIMS? Okay. There's a new one out that I discovered. It's IS, I believe it's 908. It's emergency management for elected officials that would take them 1 hour and 30 minutes to learn what their role is as an elected official at their leisure at home. They don't have to come sit in the classroom, they don't have to take a test. New program came out, I believe, at the beginning of 2014, that addresses the role of elected officials. Participate in exercises. How best to learn for an elected official to actually be there. Actually have to make hard decisions. When you're all done, you all go home. And nobody's bringing their lawyer, nobody's striking anybody. And it becomes challenging because these folks, I worked for 7 mayors, and all of them had full-time jobs, and none of them were with Brigham City. I got to the point I would send an email once a month to the elected officials with some kind of problem or a scenario and ask them for an answer as to what they would do in their role. That did 2 things. 1, I kept them thinking. And 2, they knew something was going on in emergency management. emergency management, if you haven't figured out, it's an insurance policy sitting on the shelf that we all overlook. Never use. It's like medical insurance. You sign up for it, and then you do what? Well, I sign up for it and then I complain about it costs too much. Where would we be without it? You don't drive down the road coming here today with no car insurance. Emergency management is something that they need to understand. Support and adopt emergency plans. Whether you give them an executive summary, whether they take the time to read it, or whether they have built up enough trust in their emergency management personnel that they do what? Accept it. I worked for a mayor once that, following our one disaster, I couldn't get away from it. You stop fast and get bumped, and make a left, make a right. I finally got to a point after the second day, I said, Mayor, it's okay with you, I need to go to the men's room. I'll only be gone a short time, but if you just wait here, I'll come back. Know what those mitigation plans are. Be involved in it. Support you that you can be involved in it. Service liaison. Ambassador of goodwill. We support emergency management in Sandy City. Mayor, Big Ash. Supports it for Salt Lake County. He's an advocate. We'll send him to the rest of the community. They take it seriously. Receive updates. And this varies from elected officials. I've worked, like I said, I worked for 7. I had some that once a month I could send them a list of bullet points and they were happy. I had one that if I got an email from one of the various directors at the Bureau, of the Division of Emergency Management, they wanted it. I had one city administrator accuse me of having a forest, have money invested in the forest because I burned up enough paper to keep them happy. But I got to the point I was selective in what I said to them because it developed trust between my bosses and me. This is what's going on. The state's going to have value guard exercise. These are the people that are going to participate. This is what they're going to try to accomplish. It made them knowledgeable on what was going on in emergency management, and they didn't go to a meeting with other elected officials and have somebody say, well, you know, we were participating in this exercise with the state and a shakeout, and we did this and this and this, and our mayor's sitting there going, well, I didn't know what that is. Then you don't have to go to the office and explain why they weren't included. But again, that's developed with. When's this last one really take face? In that first meeting. What do you really want from me, Mr. Commissioner? Or Mrs. Commissioner, or Miss Commissioner, Mayor? What do you want? What do you want to learn from this? What would you like me to do? So how do we share ideas? Frequent meetings. Kind that are pre-scheduled because you want to get together and be on a positive note, not one that when somebody came in and complained, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. If you put together committees, emergency management committee, emergency response committee, mitigation committee, whatever kind of committees you have in your political organization, use them. Meet with them. I have an emergency management committee once a month. Shared information I've gotten from either FEMA, from the state, from the health department, from the water people. And I always end it with a little challenge. If we had this scenario, 1, what is your role? 2, what would you do? expect something from you. How many of you work in an EOC or have the potential to work in an EOC if the world stops still? Would you rather have people in your EOC that have a basic understanding, or would you want 12 people showing up and going, hi, I'm here, this is my first day on the job, and boy, I really like it, now what would you like me to do? I've told my emergency management committee a number of times, my biggest fear, I didn't train deep enough that I was going to get the third stringers, and if I have to take them by the hand to work a disaster, guess what? I can't do it. They have to buy into it. And you'll find that if you can get your department heads, other elected officials, recorders, treasurers, involved, it makes it easier for you. And then they begin going back to their office and going, I could do this to protect me from this. I remember the first time I met with a finance director. I think I've been in the job about 6 months. And I walked in, and Brigham City does all their own utilities. We do our own utility billing, it's all done. And I said to this nice gentleman, I said, why don't we back up all these documents? Back them up, we need to back them up. I said, where do we start? Something happened, how do we do it? At the end of each day, the girls just save them and they log out. He says, oh, we're not storing those offsite. Why do I need to do that? So over a process of a year, we went from girls closing their computers down, putting them on a CD at the end of each night. Now, Brigham City stores data in Layton, Denver, Tallahassee, Florida. So he sat down and figured out what it would cost time-wise to regenerate the number of utility bill accounts. It was like, it's no brainer, Jim. How can you tell me this before? Sometimes it is. Involve people. If you're going to ask them to be part of the team, what's the team one mission? How would your emergency management team function on Sunday afternoon if you had and each one of them had a different play plan? How are you? What do you think score would be? Let's talk about success stories that you had. I think now that I've cruised around the room, had some involvement. What works, what didn't work? You don't have to tell us an age of the didn't work. I wouldn't embarrass my former peers. But what worked? What was successful in your community that made it better for you or your organization? Like, tell us about it. I know you got ideas. Chris?
Well, I took a shot and I asked America to be all right if I applied for this university. Sure, whatever, knock stuff out. I didn't really expect to get it and all that, and I've got all in my hands. I was bored of this thing and talking to the mayor about getting those folks organized. I had all the department directors, the mayor, CAO, and I had other organizations engaged in this with a year plan to get those folks back at Emmitsburg, go to this course, get them to understand a little more, get their understanding of what emergency management is about. We go through those, start the declaration, get them to show the power problems and
position following September 11th? What happened following September 11th in the first 2 or 3 years? Money, and what was happening? We bought lots of cool toys. And when you talked about emergency management or homeland security, what happened? Everybody listened. And what happens now that we're where? Yeah. It's kind of like I used to tell our mayors when I had that first one-on-one, I'd like to have a little earthquake about every 6 months, just enough to rattle Brandon's China. Because then I know I have your undivided attention. The farther we get away from things, and it's not just in emergency management, it's whatever, but the farther we get away, we forget. Something else takes precedent, we're now busy doing this, busy doing that, we don't think about it. Most of us will experience very few disasters of any kind. For instance, we just don't have we don't have enough in the state to keep us really home. We're getting a little better, we have fires and we always burn up mountainsides and then we get snow on them and then we get rain and the rain comes down. We have to do that. We don't have California, we don't have Tallahassee, Mississippi, those areas where we do this often enough that, oh, this is coming up, so we got to be prepared. We don't have it. And so it's easy to become a distant thought. That's why, developing this partnership with elected officials, whatever level, I may have even forgotten something, is critical for the success not only of you as an employee, but also for your community. Nobody wants to have notification of. We had an emergency management official that did absolutely nothing, and now we have nothing left in our community. Nor do we want our elected officials standing out there in front of the media. How often does the media come around? More than most of us would like. I mean, with the helicopters and everything else, something happens and they're there. And you're thinking, this isn't big enough. What's the problem? But they're there. Nothing's work for community. How embarrassing it is when mayors get out there and start talking about that on the news and you said, stop. Whoa, stop. Because it's going to get worse.
You might apologize if you talked about this earlier, but
It's okay to be new to me because I'm losing my mind.
it's okay. Along with the rest of us. We've got to help them understand their role and accept that role in disaster and where they fit into the EOC. When I was in Buchanan, we invited them to participate in our exercises, and they had a seat, they had a vest, they had their handbook for the policy group. So that's where they need to be. That's where we invited them, and they came in regularly during our exercises. We were talking a moment ago, that still didn't help them quite understand the importance of emergency management, but it kind of helped them understand their role a little bit more and garner a little bit more support.
Yeah, if we can get them to at least be able to spell emergency management, but if they understand their role, then we won. Because an elected official that is unprepared can do as much damage or more than whatever event you're dealing with. I use this a few times when I taught other courses. Following September 11th, what did we see on the news probably in the first hour? What did we see standing there smiling. The mayor. And what was his comment? Remember? We have this under control. I'll be willing to bet you whatever you want to bet. He didn't have a clue. But what did he say to the public, the citizens of New York, the United States, and the world? We're here. We're going to do something. We're going to respond, and we're going to recover from this, and we're going to rebuild. Now, most normal people didn't sit home and go, what reassurance did he give them? Tons. And those of us in the business win. Unless he's got a hell of a briefing in a big short period of time, he didn't have a clue. Because in that first hour, I don't know that everything had followed. They still had dust clouds all over New York City. So to know what's going on and have a handle on it, but he was out there and let the public know. And I watched and I rewatched the video from time to time. As I say, I didn't see any of his, whatever he called him, standing behind him with that, oh my God, what does he say? Because that was the plan. And then he came back and did what? He added more to it. And we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this. And he built the confidence of the community that got a handle on this. Because he didn't put emergency management folks, he didn't put fire, law enforcement, Port Authority people out there standing on a pedestal that they can't stand on because they're going to fall off. It was a team effort. That's what needs to happen with our elected officials. And the challenge comes of finding time for those folks to meet with you. Some of you function under the auspices of the sheriff's office. You probably have other responsibilities in the sheriff's office besides emergency management. How do you find time to make sure the sheriff and county commissioners understand what their role is? Because it is crucial that they understand. Do they sign something? Do they know what they're signing? Evacuating, or are you going to send it? Around the room, I think there's only two. I know what I'm talking about. When I first got my job, I got a red book that thick. And that red book says, in the event of a nuclear attack in Salt Lake County, guess what's coming to Bucks-Elder County? We're going to get all these people. You're all going to come up and live with us. And I looked at that and went, okay, how's this going to work? Remember those binders? Bob, remember those binders on that thick? Don?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Still good.
Still got them. Some are still floating around. I think I still have mine. And you look at that and you go, holy cow, where am I going to put these? I think it's a concrete 10,000 people coming to us. If you like the rural, you like camping, no hot, cold running water, no indoor plumbing, we got places we can take probably 100,000 people. Well, what does that do to our community? Coordination. Develop that relationship with your elected officials that they trust you. And once you've earned that trust, you need to be very careful that you do not destroy that trust. It may take you a while to earn that trust because it's an education package. But don't make elected officials look bad. Be very aware of it. So who else has had success stories? Any success stories? Any horror stories? Come on, somebody's got to have elected officials that's done something. Okay? we have some communities that, it's not gonna happen here, we don't have the money, don't have the time, you've heard all these issues that people feel. And tell what? I mean, you have to be a big, it can be a little. It can be a little, then guess what? Oh, geez, we should have. So, great example. It starts small. You can't go from limited or none to full blown overnight. It doesn't happen. Work with your elected officials. They should be very familiar with you, what you do, what is your role. And some of them may be involved in the community and they know what you're doing. Others may not have a clue. So involve them. One-on-one. 1-on-6, 1-on-3, whatever your commissioners, number 5 now. Involve them. You're doing them a favor. You're actually protecting them by letting them know what their job is. The time to teach them is right now. Not when full country creeks all over the place. Not when buildings that used to be standing 12 and 14, 16 stories tall are now laying in hot. It's not the time to go out and say, Mr. Commissioner, let me tell you what your job is. It's now. There's a lot of information on the website. I'll just point out a couple of them that there's one that I thought was excellent. I really like it. Emergency management for senior officials. It's a checklist of what they should do. Our emergency management official. Review what is your authority. What does that mean? How did I mean? What roles do I have? Because roles isn't there. Change the minute you have that disaster. They get to keep all the old ones. But they got a whole bunch of new ones too. But they don't know what those are. Do you have a plan? Do you have a team? I think it's pretty hard to have an emergency management program if you don't have a team. So if you don't have a team, what have you got? You got me and I. And who needs to do the work? Who needs to do the work? Public Works needs to move to clear out the roads, correct? I'm not going out there. If you put me in the backhoe, disaster should be over by the time I figure out how to make that thing work. Well, should they be involved in the decisions? You can write a plan. You've all heard the story. I can sit down and write a plan, and I can tell you that the Beaver County Sheriff's Office is going to respond to any call within the county within a half hour. That work? Yeah, right in the middle. You're asking people to do something. Shouldn't they be telling you how long it takes? Or whether they can do it? So look at creating committees. When you write that plan, and sometimes it's tough because we have, in our smaller communities, we have volunteers involved in community. Have them sit down and talk. Send it to a director over a department, police chief, fire chief, public works director, finance, and say, what is so important? All this work. Can you do what I tell you you can do? See, what's the problem? What's the city council's version? Guess who has to do what's in that plan? That's not the time the police chief goes up to the next council meeting and says, hey, wait, whoa. It says in the plan that you adopted, I'm going to do that. I can't do this. Mayor, this came up, and I scheduled this one, oh, I forgot about you, Jim, I'm sorry. It's challenging. But it can be done. Have that initial one-on-one meeting, whether it be with your mayor, county commissioner, college president, dean, appointed official, whether it be city manager, town manager, city administrator. What do you expect from me? And then be prepared to listen to what I expect from you. And it can be done without putting yourself, it can be done politically correct. I fought around for about 45 days before I let the city council know that I had some new requirements. Because it ended up being a disaster, and a disaster I could not deal with 5 people going in different directions and trying to manage the rest of the taxes. Look at sending emails, forwarding emails on to your elected and appointed officials, what's going on. Make them aware of newsletters, websites where they can be kept up to date. UEMA has been successful in the last 3 or 4 years of getting in to the Utah League of Cities and Towns, the Utah Association of Counties, and being able to do a presentation called Emergency Management 101. What is your role now that you are a elected official? Invitations to workshops like this one. Even if they came part of the day, get them involved. We've heard other ways of doing it. Get your community involved. Some questions that your elected official may ask you: what are the hazards we're dealing with? What kind of problems do we have? How would you, as my emergency management official, whether you're appointed, you're an hourly, whether you've got 3 hats and this is 4th, what do you see are hazards in your community? And what are we going to do to mitigate it? Excuse me. What's the disaster declaration process? Here's the one that I was asked probably 7 times with my mayor. What's my job in an emergency? None of them go to work and say, well, I'm going to go in and screw up emergency management. Not one of them, I'm sorry. But they need to know. And what is NIMS? I get that question all the time from them. What's NIMS? How does that affect me? I'm not in charge of anything. Yes, you are. And here's your role. And you can't divest yourself of that role. You can't go to the EOC and say, I'm no longer the mayor. I'm just being over the corner. What are some training opportunities? As I said, whether it's League of Cities and Towns, Association of Counties, website, FEMA, the independent study, there's ICS 402 for elected officials, which really breaks it down for elected officials. What are the emergency management plans? What is my role? Is it clearly defined in there? Can you spend some time with me explaining what I should be doing? What is emergency management? I don't think there's a clear definition of what emergency management is in the state of Utah because of the size of our various communities. Just like, what is a disaster? A disaster in one community may be no more than a hiccup in another. But yet a big hiccup in Salt Lake County can totally destroy Box Elder. And here's the one that's kind of tricky to answer. Why is emergency management important? Why do we need to do this? Isn't there a policy I can just go out and buy and we pay $10,000 and if something happens, everything's taken care of, and we move down the road like insurance or the other plans. In closing, I've tried to give you kind of an overview. Every community is different. Every elected official is different. You need to find what works for you. I can tell you, after 30 years, Mayor would ask me about something, and I'll say, you know, Mayor, I don't know everything there is about emergency management. But I have one hellacious logbook of people. And I found in 30 years, Reach out to communities around you, reach out to other communities in the state, reach out to UEMA. The resources are there to help you develop a working partnership with your elected officials. But without it, it's a long, long road. Sometimes at the end of that road, may not be in your best interest as well as your community. Any questions, comments? Appreciate the feedback. It can be done. I can tell you that. I'm a firm believer. Yes, sir.
It seems like it would be a smaller community, less officials don't understand the role of the department. How would you recommend bridging that gap to open it up? Is there some easy methodology for that?
Have a one-on-one. And go in with this checklist. And you can go through that checklist beforehand and say, yeah, we have emergency management. I've done an executive summary for you, Mayor, and here's what I feel are your responsibilities should we have that disaster. With several of my mayors, I had to make sure that they knew where I was. I couldn't go very far out of their sight because they didn't feel comfortable unless I was in the way. But develop that rapport with them on, if you start with the basics, here's the checklist, Mayor, why don't you look this over? And I'll set a meeting up in a couple of weeks, and we'll come back and talk about it, and you tell me what questions you have. And then we'll devise a plan. A plan that helps me help you as mayor, and helps you as mayor help me, so when we get to the end of the road, in December 31st of 2015, you're happy, I'm happy, but the community is happy, because what? We're doing something. So it's small, little bites. Like here, little like there. Find out communities around you that have been successful. Reach out to past fellows. Reach out if you're a city, reach out to your county. And see if they come. Your liaisons are great. People come up and, you take a phone call at 538-3400 and they have a whole staff that loves to get on a nice day and travel. They'd be more than happy to come up and do like that. Come up and provide you with some help. It can be done. And you may take one step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, but it can be done.
Yeah, I just want to tell you, the reflections from Duncan today, where they are at, probably the most bad. I've been a mayor, I've been a county commissioner, I've been an emergency manager for 11 years. So I've been on both sides of the board. Most people haven't had that opportunity to just do what Jim says and approach it. And there's some subject matter, communication, don't even pull up money, don't even pick blocks of paper, any of that other kind of stuff. One of my most successful things that happened was, I'm in Rich County, I said, they had a propane tanker go over right down. Well, talked to the county commission, and they go to facilities. So we had 2 guys sitting there, were able to watch what I did, what emergency response did, and I was really lucky. And now, in my county, I have confidence in the commissioners. They have confidence in me if they need to know something, they can do something, and I'll let them know, right? I'm very impressed. You may be wrong, but I'm going to talk.
Nothing wrong with being retired old love. Any other questions? I apologize for taking 1 minute away from your break. You can beat me with old money from my check that I needed or whatever. Thanks for coming.